all of it took place in Avila. This was what was going on until she reached 1565, when she began to write of her experiences. 1562, but then the second redaction was in 1565. So the external mark of the city at this time is that it suffers, the city of Avila, that it suffered from a double hostility, social and religious, toward the mystical phenomena in women visionaries. They were hostile, whether from the pseudo-mystical episodes that had recently occurred in Spain. Teresa says, since at that time other women had fallen into serious illusions and deceptions caused by the devil, unquote. These were Teresa's immediate words. And whether through the iron, so that just points out to us one aspect, and then whether through the iron attitude of the Inquisition with regard to the Illuminists. So she says these are severe times, or whether from episodes of the famous Avilan Maridia, an exceptional woman who had nothing of these illusions, but she was looked upon with hostility. Hence the two hostile forces that frame nearby Teresa's mystical experiences. On the one hand, the forces that the permanent harassment of her religious assessors, inclined to fear hidden demons in these events, and on the other, Teresa herself, who from welcoming them in the psychological context of favor, cedes to the alarm and is frightened by what is happening to her. She is very systematically on guard against herself. And when the interior fact becomes public, when she began to receive raptures and had to get her nuns to hide her raptures, not only does she blush, but she would prefer to be buried alive, she said, than to have others see her in rapture. And even thinks seriously about going off to a faraway Carmel where she would be unknown. No one would know her. That is to say, the Teresian mystical fact does not arise in an environment of favor, and neither applauded nor magnified by the chorus of spectators, nor does Teresa herself have the least temptation to histrionics or exhibitionism. In her, the mystical fact goes against the grain. Now the inquisitor, Soto, to help Teresa, he wasn't an adversary, he was trying to help her, suggests that she write the book and submit it to Master John of Avila, St. John of Avila. He was just recently canonized. On the other hand, among those who ordered her to write was a close theologian friend, the Dominican Garcia de Toledo, who empathized with her and her living experiences, because he was also having experiences, and who not only ordered her to write, but pressured her and closely followed the process, read it, wanted her to write more of the book, and took possession of the writing as soon as it was finished. He kept it for himself. She wrote for him. He needed to know from within the mystical experiences that Teresa was undergoing, and there was raised up in his soul a surge of expectation. Teresa wrote this second redaction not in Toledo, in the palace of Doña Luisa, but in Avila, at the poor writing desk of her cell on her knees, in St. Joseph's. She didn't write it at a desk. She wrote it on her knees at the windowsill. knelt at the window and wrote there. It keeps, and so she had very poor surroundings. They didn't have anything in the cell, but then she had many breaks. She wrote it according to herself, with many breaks and little by little, stealing time because it keeps me from spinning. It was a poor house and she had to spin to help support. She was 50 at the time. The book of her life is generally known as Teresa's autobiography. But it is not strictly speaking an autobiography. It doesn't comprise in its complexity the history of Teresa. Its autobiographical content is partial and only in sections. Its plan develops only the thread of Teresa's relationship with God. That's what she's talking about mainly. Yet giving more space and relief to God's relations with her. She is interested above all in resolving a pressing problem that underlies the whole narration. What meaning does this intervention of God in her life, does it have? What meaning does this intervention in God in her life have? Why does it always increase on taking complete possession of her? Teresa wants to clarify for herself and for those ordering her to write the meaning of her life, not only by referring to it by understanding it, not only giving an account of it, but by understanding and interpreting it. From Teresa's viewpoint, this relationship between God and herself is concentrated on prayer, and for Teresa, prayer is a sharing in friendship. For this reason, there is interpolated in the account a long parenthesis in the middle part on the degrees of prayer, the ways of watering the garden. She inserts that into the text. Teresa begins by recounting her life and prayer in her home environment and the highs and lows of her conduct that frames her prayer or abandonment of prayer. She gave it up for a time. Or the recovery of the truth she knew in childhood when she went back to prayer. The family, the readings, the vocation to the Carmelite life, then her illness, and she told the story of her infidelities that she believed incompatible with the mystical graces which came upon her. All of this covers up to chapter 9. Chapter 10 connects with a change of direction in the account. From here on, the matter must be kept secret. But first, Teresa feels the need to set forward a key to the reading with an outline of the degrees of prayer. From chapter 16, we have the degrees of prayer. An interpolation on the humanity of Christ, for without taking this into account, the mystical fact that it ensues in the third section of the book will be hardly intelligible. So from chapter 16 on the degree to 22 on the degrees of prayer, 22 to 23 to 31, she tells of the most burning facts of the mystical life, and then the relations with God, and God with her. Teresa entered experientially into the mysterious sphere of the presence of God. First she listens, locutions, and then she sees visions. She doesn't understand. But there follow two powerful experiences. The first, for the sake of centering her scattered activity. No longer do I want you to converse with men, but with angels. God tells her in a vision. And then to illumine the mind and engage it, disengage it from human theories, she says, I will be for you a living book. That was when all her favorite books were put on the index, the forbidden books. When the Index of Valdez came out, then the Lord appeared and said to her, don't worry, Teresa, I will be for you a living book. From then on, Teresa wrote her own books, really. Then Jesus Christ becomes present and installs himself in her life. But all of this did not remain in a closed interiority or in ecstatic contemplation. The mystical contemplation turned into an imperative and impelling call to action with regard to others. Then comes an absolute novelty for her life. Teresa received the command to found a monastery. This was seen as the wrong thing to do by almost all the surrounding learned men and by her superiors. In contrast also with the peace of her life in her old monastery. It was also against the common sense of Teresa herself, who had no means to found a monastery because she had to have money. The book then centers on the commission of making the foundation of St. Joseph's in Avila. The life is an anonymous narration for life. It is so programmed by Teresa that it states neither the name nor the title of the book. She presents it in sum as an account that my confessors commanded me to write. She never gives her name or the place. We know it and we just read that into the text, but the text doesn't say anything about Teresa. She doesn't give the name of the city, this place, she refers to it, nor does she give the name of her companions along the way. Of the 100 persons who populate the account, only 3 appear with an uncovered face. First, St. Peter of Alcantara, then second, St. Francis Borgia, who was a duke of the Gandia, Francisco, Father Francisco. They weren't saints, Fray Pedro de Alcantara, but later they were canonized, Father Francisco, and then Father Master John of Avila. They all became saints. Those are the only ones she mentions. When she has finished the account, she writes a letter of consignment, also without mentioning the name of the one for whom it is destined. She beseeches the unnamed person to arrange to have a copy made if they are going to bring it to Padre Master John of Avila, since someone might recognize her handwriting and thus identify her. So she wanted it to be kept a secret, this book, about who it was about.